All right, welcome back, guys. Last episode, we heat treated the blade. That consisted of us putting it in the kiln, letting it come up to heat, quenching it in Parks 50 oil, and then tempering it. So this is what it looks like now. This is actually a really good indicator that it tempered perfectly. It's a nice straw color. That's the color you're looking for. Like I said, we only tempered this once at 350. The reason why you don't want to temper it twice like most other knives is because it's actually going to get rid of some of the activity if you do it twice. So only once. All right, so now we get to do the fun part, which we're going to try and speed through because it's not that interesting, which is hand sanding. During the hand sanding, I'll explain how I hand sand to give you guys some tips. I've made videos about this before. But vise having to go and find that information, we'll just include it in this video. But it's super basic information, so if you have your own way of doing it, it works for you, keep doing it that way. The way that I hand sand has nothing to do with bringing out the hamon. In other words, obviously it has something to do with bringing out the hamons, but what I mean is you don't have to do it my way to bring out a hamon. If you have your way of doing it, do it that way if it works for you. All right, so let's get to it. All right, so I wanted to just bring your attention to the knife vise that I'm using. I'm using the Trojan Horse Forge knife vise. I think it goes for about $400 now. Obviously, that's subject to change, but it's 100% worth the money. I'll put their link in the description below so you can check it out. But I figured the less time I spend making, equipment to make knives, the more time I spend making knives. So that's the sandpaper that I have set up. I use 320, 600, and then 1200. So first off, I have a hard back sanding block, and then I also have a hard rubber sanding block. So I convex my edges, so I use this because it has a lot of give. It allows me to continue on that flat, but then also blend in that convex grind into the main bevel. So I'm going to start off on the flat using the 320. And this is actually, when you start sanding this is a really good indication of how clean your grind was, because you're going to see every inconsistency or like facet that your platen left. Luckily for me, this side at least is pretty clean. You can see the difference between the flat part of the bevel and that convex edge. Like I said, I'm going to blend that in at 320 with that hard rubber. Also, a thing of note is there's two cool things about doing a convex edge. One is obviously the geometry, right? It's giving you more meat behind the edge, but it's also allowing for a very fine edge at the same time. So it's kind of like what a hamon does for durability and edge retention. It's kind of the same idea in that it kind of serves two purposes. But the really cool thing is when I leave my edge thick enough so that the blade doesn't warp or crack or something like that during the quench, because it is a hamon and that can happen sometimes. I've never had it happen to me, but I have seen people online that have reported their blades cracking because their edge was far too thin when they quenched. Convexing that edge after the fact allows you to bring that edge down to a zero grind without taking too much material off of the main bevel, because like I said, the more material you abrade off of the surface where the hamon is, the less activity you're going to have, because some of that ashi is a surface phenomenon. All right, so the flat is now taken up to 320. Now what I need to do is I need to use that hard rubber piece, and I'm going to be getting into the plunge line as well as that convex edge. Now, when you're blending in the convex edge, it's really important to get this done properly at the lower grits. You don't want any sort of facets or anything. You want to make it look as though it is one smooth bevel, if that makes sense. So 320 is complete. Now we moved up to 600. Notice how the angle that I'm sanding the blade has changed. Now I'm actually sanding at a diagonal. What this is doing is it's changing the scratch pattern. Initially I was at 320 and I was going straight along the blade. Now I'm going at a diagonal, so all those 320 scratches are still going straight along the blade. As I sand at a diagonal, I'm going to continue to see those 320 scratches until I actually abrade them away. I'm going to be able to see the difference in direction of the scratch pattern. Once all of those straight along the blade 320 scratch pattern scratches, I guess, are gone, that's when I know the blade has actually truly been taken up to 600 grit. All right, so we're gonna just speed through 1200, just get it done so we can go ahead and get to the edge. And there it is. One of the things that I neglected to mention was ensuring that you have a ton of light, like a lot of really bright light around your blade, so that you can observe the blade from different angles, just to make sure that you actually got all of the previous scratches out. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm showing you the hamon, but I'm also checking to make sure that all those scratches are out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare it for the etch, and I do that by cleaning the blade. There's nothing more irritating than having to re-etch a blade or re-hand sand a blade, then re-etch it because it etched unevenly. And you can avoid all of that hassle by just ensuring the blade is clean. And so I do that by using dish soap and obviously just sink water. Some people use distilled water, make sure they only use distilled water. I haven't seen any difference between the two. As long as the blade is clean, it etches just fine. Also, one thing that you want to keep in mind is in the past I used to use like lubricant while hand sanding. And even if I don't use a lubricant, I always wash the blade twice before my initial etch. It's happened way too many times in the past where I washed it once, thought I was good, either had a little bit of soap left on the blade that I just didn't feel or see, or I had some of that lubricant, which I used to use WD-40. Some people use Windex, which is, that kind of cleans the blade in itself, but I always wash it twice just to be 100% sure that it's clean, so I get a nice even etch. Alright, so let's take it to the ferric chloride and let's get it ready for etching. So I use a 4-to-1 water to ferric chloride mixture, and my first etch is always just a couple minutes, so like 2 minutes. Then I'll take it out. I'll rinse it off in the sink. I don't neutralize the acid, only because I'm going to go straight to hand sanding, and I've neutralized it with Windex in the past, and it's given me weird streaks. I know that baking soda water works just fine. I just don't have any right now. So this is 2500 grit sandpaper. I'm going to use this to take all the oxides off, and I'm going to use that hard rubber sanding block to do the sanding. And the reason why not neutralizing works for me is I tend to get straight into the sanding like really quick, so it doesn't have the acid doesn't really have a chance to continue etching the blade. All right, and so some of you might be like, why is he going all the way to 2500 for like a basic hamon? And that's just my preference. You can stop technically at 600 grit and get pretty good results by doing everything that you're going to see in the rest of this video, minus taking it up to 1200 and then etching and then 2500. I'm just at the point now that I'm kind of a hamon snob, so I know very much what I like and the effect that I'm trying to go for. So when I'm trying to do this sort of hamon, like a more grayish subdued hamon, I like doing that for more like tactical type blades, which is why I'm doing it for the special operations like the Wu knife. So that's just my preference. But you're going to take the oxides off with 2500, ensuring that you got really clean and an even scratch pattern. You can make your scratch pattern very even. After getting all the oxides off, what I will do then is I will take a clean piece of 2500 and I will then do straight pulls from the plunge line all the way down to the tip of the knife. Alright, so right here I'm wiping the blade off with a shop towel. I only use shop towels when I deal with hamons, simply because the shop towels don't have any tannins in the fabric like white paper towels do, and the tannins can actually affect the way that it etches. and so I obviously don't even mess with that, even though the chances are very small, and sometimes it doesn't happen. It's just not, you're just creating more potential work for yourself, and it's just not worth it. Now, this is what I was talking about with those straight pulls. I mean, you can see just in the video that the sanding is extremely clean. I'm just ensuring that where the hamon is, where the softer steel is, I'm actually trying to get rid of the oxides there for a specific effect. So you can see how it's a little bit lighter color than the harder steel. I want to try to take that as close to looking like the harder steel below the hamon line as I can. That's going to give me a specific effect after the etch. So this is kind of getting into the more advanced stuff, like what I'm explaining here, with getting rid of the oxides. You don't have to do this. This is going to give me a different effect than what you saw from that original Woo Hunter that I showed in the first video. The Woo Hunter in the first video, the softer steel was much darker than the harder steel. If you reference the first video, you'll see it and be like, okay. What I'm doing here is I'm going to make the softer steel appear as close as I can to looking like the harder steel. That's just the effect that I want to go with this particular knife. So if you don't want the finished effects and you want it to look more like the first knife I showed you, then you're just going to skip this step. And one thing that you're going to learn really quickly when you start getting into hamons is there is a million ways to skin this cat. All right, so there is no real right answer on how to do a hamon. It's really just about what your preference is. Like I said before, you don't have to take it all the way to 2,500. I mean, even some hamons I take to 3,000, and I'm going to start taking other hamons up to 5,000. That's not necessary for all blades. Just depends on what your preference is, what your experience level is, and the amount of time that you want to spend on it. All right, so we're going to etch it again, which means we got to clean it again and then put it right back in the ferric. And this is why we call it a flitz hamon, because we use flitz polish in order to polish it to its final grit. So here there's a couple different ways you can do this. Because I have my makeup pads upstairs, I'm just going to use the blue shop towel to rub in the polish. And as you already insinuated, like makeup pads, like your wife's makeup pads, you can use to rub the polish in. And the reason why you can use or makeup pads are like the main method of rubbing it in is because they're really soft and they're not going to leave scratches, but they'll still move around the abrasive. But as I said before, the shop towels don't leave any scratches, so you can use a shop towel as well. All right, so right now the hamon looks pretty light, but when you oil it and then wax it, it actually darkens the line a bit. So that's our final product. I may make one last video just to kind of wrap everything up so you can see the final piece when everything's said and done. But as far as the hamon's concerned, you got it. Now you know how to do a flitz hamon. I mean, if you liked this video, let me know in the comments and we will do a more advanced hamon video with more information. I'll see you next time.